So in this video I want to show you my favorite souffle that I cook all the time because it's so fast, it almost needs no ingredients and you will always succeed with it. Now when I used to serve it, I upgraded it a little bit, which you can learn in my online course, where you actually put a fruit compote like a rhubarb and strawberry compote on the bottom of the souffle, or just some raspberries. But here we go, that's the quickest dessert you can ever make, and it's really impressive too. So I want to give you the remaining tips that you need to know to sort of perfect the souffle before we kick off the recipe. So going back to the oven, you need to always cook your souffle on traditional bake. So don't go off and start cooking your souffle on fan force, because that would be too invasive and it would often make the souffle wonky and as well boil over. So don't have any air movement in the oven. Now, the next tip is properly greased heat-proofed molds. Now you need to especially grease them on the top edges where the souffle has to rise, because sometimes it sticks on there and then the souffle doesn't come out evenly and it might come out sort of a bit wonky because the dough basically got attached to the mold and it could not rise nicely. Now a firmly whipped meringue that is still sort of creamy, to give the souffle a much creamier texture and a more even rising. If the meringue is over whipped, it starts to desert the air bubble net within the egg white and they will not rise. Salt in the meringue is an absolute no-no, as it will make the egg white runny and the air bubbles cannot form tightly. So never ever put any salt into your egg white that you beat up to a meringue. Now, cook the souffles always close to the bottom, and do allow them to rise much more even as well, to maintain the heat from the bottom, because you need to seal the souffle inside of the mold, as I told you in my first video. Now souffles have to be undisturbed through the whole cooking process, and most ovens are pretty good now because they all have, you know, glass windows. In the old days it was a bit harder because the chef would get nervous and then they would look inside. You need to think that the souffle can only rise if the air bubbles within inside the souffles are getting really hot and hot air expands. Now if you open the oven too often, cold air will go into the oven and they basically will stop the air bubbles from rising, and that can also make your souffle collapse. That's why souffle basically collapse when you take it out of the oven. You know that the cold air will basically bring the hot air bubbles within the souffle back to its original state, and that's why a souffle then collapses. It's as simple as that. Now, souffles have to be cooked on the outside and warm through the center, so which means you only ever cook your souffle to approximately halfway through, or the most 2/3 through. If you overcook them, you will overheat the egg. Now when you overheat the eggs become, and I'm sure you had your fair share of chewy scrambled eggs on an airplane or hotel resort. If you overcook them, they do become chewy, and they do become, in case of souffles, because it contains sugar as well, they will become watery. Please enjoy that video where you can now cook souffles like a Michelin star chef. So first you need some cream cheese, or like when I used to make that back in Austria, I just used something that's called quark, which is basically cream cheese. And then flavoring wise, I use lemon, but you can also use a tablespoon of vanilla essence in the recipe if you want. So first separate the eggs, and the way you do that is literally just don't move the egg yolk too much around between the shells, only change it once over and let the egg white just drip off. Then place 3 egg yolks in a bowl. So for this recipe we'll need 3 egg yolks, 4 egg whites. Don't use the 4th egg white in the souffle, it makes it unfortunately a bit too runny, which will not allow you to build your souffle nicely into the mold later on. So then stir that all together. So cream cheese, lemon zest, or a bit of vanilla if you want to, and the egg yolks, you stir them together, then grease the molds. Now it's extremely important to grease the molds as thick as you can. So make sure that the sides are really well covered, that the edges on the top are really well covered, because the last thing is you want to do, as I said before, is that your souffle somewhere gets stuck on the top of the mold where there's no butter, and then you find that the whole souffle is literally just sticking there, and it doesn't come out of the mold evenly. It comes out wonky. So then the sugar, you don't put sugar on the bottom of the souffle, you don't need that. You just sort of rinse it a little bit on the side, just a little bit, because the sugar is just an optical thing. It doesn't do anything. As the souffle comes out, the sugar will melt, as I explained in the other video, and make your souffle nice and shiny. So next thing is you whip your egg whites. So whip them basically to a really, really good meringue. And as I said before, no salt. Salt is a disaster when mixed together with eggs, because it basically makes the eggs really, really watery and really, really runny. That's why French chefs, when they cook an omelette, they never add salt to their omelette mixture. They only do that at the very, very last second. But you can learn that also in my online courses as well as in my other videos. So then when the egg white is sort of really, really stiff, you can see that here. I added the sugar, so you always whip the egg white first up without the sugar. You make sure that your bowl is clean, there's no fat in the bowl, there's no egg yolk or anything in the bowl, because fat will not allow your egg white to foam up as nicely and become a really good meringue. And then you just fold in, so you just fold in the mixture now. So you fold in the first third or first quarter of the egg white, and then you add the rest, and it goes really easily, nicely together. So when you mix things together in a bowl like here for souffle, you always need to work from the bottom upwards, because it's always something seems to get stuck on the bottom. So don't just mix in the top, always get your spatula right on the bottom of the bowl and then lift it up, and through that you will make sure that everything is very, very well combined. So here we go. That is your cream cheese souffle. That's how easy it was. It was literally just 4 ingredients, wasn't it? So then you put it into your mold, and as I've shown you in my other video, you basically make sure that you fill it up. Want that the souffle sticks out by approximately 1 centimeter of the mold. You can just leave it like so, or again you get the spatula or a little palette knife, and you move your souffle away from the side of the mold, because later on when it comes out it will sort of spread itself out anyway. So chefs often, they just run their thumb across the top as well and then flatten it out a bit. But if you don't have the time, just do what I do here. Just try to put your souffle mixture into the mold without the mold touching the sides of the mold. And basically through that you literally achieve the same thing without doing all the sort of technically perfectly shaping it. So here we go. It will just spread itself out as you will see in the video. So now this time I do what I explained in the first video. I get a boiling hot water bath. So that's a boiling hot water bath, and I make sure that boils, and then I put it onto the stove, and then I transfer the souffle with the boiling hot water bath into the oven. You can of course have a tray of boiling hot water in the oven if you want to put 4 or 5 souffles in there. The other thing I need to tell you, if you put souffles in the oven, don't overload the oven. You can never put more than, if you have a 60 centimeters oven, you cannot put more than 5 souffles into your oven, because otherwise they will not cook evenly, because in between the souffles you might have too much, you know, the temperature might drop because they're quite cold. So now you can see how that souffle rises nicely. The outside has now sealed. The mold is obviously well heated through that hot water bath, and through that the air bubbles that are trapped inside the souffle will now start to expand and basically make it really nice and high. And here we go. Here's a cream cheese souffle. I hope you enjoyed that video. As I said, I put a fruit compote on the bottom usually, like made of rhubarb and strawberry, but that is just such a nice souffle, and I served that for some celebrities back in London in the restaurants I used to run. I'm just gonna taste it now, and as you can see, it's super creamy. The center is perfectly cooked. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Thank you.